I tried out for an 8th grade and I didn't make it. And I remember I was like sitting on my couch crying, and I either have two options. I either give up cheer completely or work really hard to like get good and try to cheer in high school.
Today on the show, I'm chatting with a recently retired cheerleader from the University of Mississippi. Mason Dashiell is up next. Welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive deep into the world of sports, talking with retired athletes, current athletes, and everyone that makes the sports world great. A quick reminder, please subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode wherever you listen or watch. Now, grab your iced tea or your coffee because I'm from the South. Get ready to be motivated and inspired because this is where the real stories are told. Today's guest is a newly retired cheerleader from the University of Mississippi, where she is finishing up her sports journalism degree. Welcome to the show, Mason Dashiell.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be on here today.
I am too. So for those that, yes, she has already been a sports broadcaster, sports reporter. So she's probably better at this than I am. But I just, before we get into your story, because we've known each other for a couple of years, I want to tell people how we met. We actually met through kind of Memphis basketball, Memphis football, Memphis sports. And we saw each other every now and then, and we got to talking. And, I love meeting people, and you're just as friendly as I am. So we just hit it off great. And that's really how it happened. And we've just stayed in touch once you transferred to from Memphis to Ole Miss. And we'll talk about that later. I didn't hold that against you, but but we'll get into all of that good stuff. But before we get into the years leading up to right now, as I mentioned in the intro, you're newly retired from cheer. What kind of precipitated that decision? And was it a slow decision or was it a quick decision?
Yeah, it definitely was not easy, because cheering at Ole Miss is honestly, it's amazing. Cheering anywhere in college is a really great experience. I think for me, it's something that I definitely like prayed over and talked to my friends about. And so, the transition from cheering on the sidelines, it took up so much time. Every single day of the week, we were doing something except for Sunday. And sometimes on Sundays, we had cheer clinics. So those weeks, we really didn't have a break at all.
Right.
And it was kind of a joint decision. Me and some of my friends that were on the team, they also kind of decided to stop. And
Wow.
just it was just like it took up so much time, and the stress I think that was like associated around it, and some of like the drama that was also associated around it. I kind of just wanted like a break from it. And the main decision came when our practice times, some of the journalism classes that I needed to graduate, I found out were going to conflict with our practice times for like this next year. And
Right.
so a way for me to like not take those classes because I'm kind of already behind. So because of that, I kind of was just like, yeah, I just think that it would be best if I, didn't do it and kind of take a break and just kind of experience college as like a normal student.
There have been a lot of athletes on here that have talked about when they got to college, their dream of what they wanted to pursue in the terms of education conflicted with their sport. And many times they had to make a choice. And ultimately, especially for some of them, it was they chose their sport just because they saw a professional career going forward. But it is a commitment. You pursue, both things take a lot of commitment. And so I do think that if you are high up in both your sport and your education, one of them eventually is going to have to take the back seat to that. So once, that's a big thing that several of you, like how many plus you decided to stop?
Um, so three of my close friends decided to stop completely. But out of like I want to say like 22 to 24 on our team, 10 over half of the team either decided not to come back or decided to transfer, if that says anything.
It
Um,
does. It
so
does.
yeah, I won't go into like super deep details, but over half the team is either like going somewhere else to cheer, or they just decided that it was too much and they just weren't gonna do it again. So it definitely wasn't easy, but I also knew for me that like as much as I love cheering, I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to like cheer somewhere else. I was like, if I'm not gonna cheer here, I'm just really gonna focus on like my major, and I really do hope to graduate in like a year. So I figured that should be a priority.
So are you technically a junior or a senior?
I should be a senior
Okay.
next semester.
Okay.
I extra semester or like a couple months. I might do summer school next summer to try to get
Right.
grad.
Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning. Oh, well, first, what does it feel like? So you've officially been retired for what, since May?
Yes.
So how does it feel to not have to do any camps this summer in terms of cheer and not have to, because I'm sure all of you have to be back at school way before the start of school. So how has that been adjusting to not having a sport to stay
Yeah.
top notch in?
It's definitely a lot different. I feel like I felt a lot more like relief and less stressful
Mm.
because last summer I know that like every single week we had to like submit a series of videos of us like practicing or working out. That was due every single Friday, and so like not having to do that takes a lot of stress off of me. I feel like so
Mhm.
that aspect of it, I feel like it's been kind of a nice break to actually get to have a job and work because that was something I also wasn't able to do cheering so much, I couldn't really keep like a steady job because it was just hard for me with my schedule.
Sure. Um, Also, do you have a current fitness routine since you don't have to stay up to date with cheer? Like, are you working out at all?
Yeah, so I still try to like go to the gym because I know for a lot of people, like as soon as you quit a sport, that
Mm-hmm.
like take a huge toll. So I definitely still try to go to the gym, maybe not as often as like I did before. But I still try to go like once or twice a week, and like just do like a hit workout where I try to implement some of the things that we learned while cheering, but like not on like the same level.
No, we had a swimmer from Louisville here just a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about her difficulty was she no longer had like a strict regimen of what she had to do on every workout.
Right.
And so now she like didn't know what to do. Like it was so unfamiliar because she had been swimming for so long that it
Mhm.
was just really hard. And we've had a couple of football players that talked about how like they didn't know, like it's not that they didn't know, it's like it was so much freedom, they weren't sure like what to do first.
Right.
And how that's been kind of the hard thing is continuing that on. So let's go back to the beginning. Like, where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm from Franklin, Tennessee area. That's where I grew up, just south of Nashville.
That's right.
Um, so yeah, I've pretty much lived here my whole entire life until I moved to college.
I am very familiar with the Nashville area and with Franklin. My aunt and my cousins lived in Nashville, so I spent many summers there with them. I'm very familiar with the area. Way before you were born, let me tell you, just way before. So what I told you I was stalking you online as I was prepping for this, which I do. I stalk a lot of people online. um I was prepping for this and I read this article that you didn't start cheer until later in life. So what did you start doing at what age?
So my parents actually tried to get me into like everything imaginable except for cheer, which I wish they would have. Like skating lessons, ballet lessons, like you name it, they tried to put me in it. And I just like didn't really find interest. Like there were some things that I would like start and then like it just wasn't for me. But in middle school, I did do basketball and softball, kind of just like, on the side. Yeah, I didn't start cheering until I was in middle school. And I remember like I think I went to softball tryouts and it was just way different and like fast pitched, and I was very small, like I still kind of am, and
I
I was like
still kind of am.
yeah, just not for me, like everybody was a lot bigger than I was, and I was like I cannot play softball anymore. And so I remember I went to cheer tryouts with like no experience. My mom was just kind of like, hey, like I cheered, so like maybe you could try it. And so I made the junior varsity team in middle school, and that's kind of like where it started.
So did your mom cheer in college?
She didn't cheer in college, but she cheered like
She,
in high school.
okay. Um, what was what was are you an only child? I don't think I know that. Are you? You are. Okay, so I see they were like, please get you into something. You're gonna drive us crazy. What was it about cheer? Like, do you remember a moment when you like really fell in love with cheer?
Yeah, so I actually so there was like a junior varsity and varsity team at my middle school, and
Hmm.
I was maybe my 6th and 7th grade year, and I tried out for an 8th grade and I didn't make it. And I remember I was like sitting on my couch crying, and I was like, I either have two options. I was like, I either give up cheer completely, or I like work really hard to like get good and try to cheer in high school. And so I took a whole year off in 8th grade, and I did all star cheer, and I was like in the gym every day, and then I worked super hard to make it in high school. And I remember like my freshman year when I made it, I was like, it was the first time I'd ever like cried like tears of joy because I was so excited that I had like made the team, and I didn't think that I would have. And so like from then on, I just kind of like fell in love with it and really liked doing it.
So, for those listeners out there, All Star Cheer is competitive cheer, not in the school system, correct? I do know a little stuff, but I think that's really incredible. So, as an eighth grader, what motivated you to pick the harder path,
Yeah.
to take the year off, to do the competitive cheer instead of just giving up? Like, what motivated you mentally for that?
I just remember like I remember like my dad telling me that like Michael Jordan, like the same thing kind of happened to him, which sounds like so crazy. But like he had, I think it was in high school, like he had
It
tried
was.
basketball and like didn't make it and like worked really hard. And so like as crazy as that sounds, like my dad was telling me that story, and he really pushed me. I feel like he was like, like you can either stop here and choose to do something else, or like you could take this as an opportunity that the other girls that are, just cheering during the school year, if you're like in the gym and you're doing all-star cheer, um I feel like it would give me a little bit of like a leg up, because I personally think competitive cheer is a lot harder
It
than
is.
at school cheer, so it actually taught me a lot, and it was a really good experience.
Yeah, it is harder. And the other thing is, you can look at that as, a lot of basketball players. I don't know. I don't think football has AAU, but like why doesn't football have AAU? Um,
Yeah.
anyway, I digress. I'm sorry, listeners.
No, it's
Okay. But I mean, you look at basketball players and they go and play AAU teams, and baseball players do travel teams. My great nephew was on a travel team this entire summer to get better at competitive baseball and competitive basketball. But it's really the same mentality is you just want to use an organization to help you get better, and you're right, it's focusing all on that, and you don't have to worry about all the school stuff and all of the because not everybody on a school cheer team is going to be a competitive advantage or going to be at a competitive level. What would as a freshman and a sophomore in college, like what were you, or even in middle school, like what were your goals after high school, or did that even enter your mind?
I don't think it entered my mind until like maybe my end of my junior year, like start of senior year. I remember like thinking about like how sad that I would be if like senior night was like my last night cheering. And I was like,
Mm.
how could I make senior night like not sad? Because I remember like everyone being so upset, everyone's posting like, last time cheering, and I was like, what if I could like cheer in college? And so I started thinking about that like probably the end of my junior year, and I was like, if I could work towards like cheering in college, I wouldn't be that sad to like graduate high school, because I would know that like I'm looking forward to something. And my parents actually like weren't super on board with it. Um sounds like they were supportive like later on, but like I kept telling them like I wanted to do it, and they were honestly kind of like trying to talk me out of it, because they're like, it's a commitment, like not that they weren't like, oh, I don't think you can do it, but like to an extent they were kind of like, like there's a lot of competition out there, like we don't want, something to happen and like you give your hopes up. But it's just something that like I really wanted to like work towards.
So at that time, what did you want your education to be? Because when you go to college, you have to major in something. So while you're still in high school, like what did you even give any thought to like what you wanted your major to be in education?
Yeah, so in high school is actually when we had like a school news on every Friday and the
Mhm.
seniors got to run it. And so my freshman year you kind of like pick a track on like what you want to do. And so I picked film and TV, but originally I wanted to be like an anchor or like a meteorologist. Those were like my top two. And then my senior year, my teacher sat me down and he was like, "Hey, like we really need a girl to cover sports. Would you be interested?" And I don't know why he picked me, but I was like, yeah, that actually sounds like fun. So every week, my senior year of high school, I would interview a different player from like a different sport. And that's kind of how I fell in love with like wanting to do like sports reporting or something in like the sports media world.
So I do know that you and your dad started a sports podcast or a sports show. And
Yes.
was that as a result of you doing that weekly news thing?
Yeah, kind of. So my dad, he kind of like has a little bit of like a radio background, and so he really wanted to start like nobody called our high school football games. Nobody called it live. So like they would have like a radio that would give like the sports updates for our high school, but like there was nobody that called like our games live. And so
Really?
yeah, and so during like this was kind of around like COVID too, but it started right before. But especially during COVID, like this was helpful because like, a lot of grandparents like can't come to the
Yeah.
game. So my dad was like, I'm gonna start live calling all of your high school games. So he probably started it like I want to say like my freshman or sophomore year of high school. And then he kind of stuck with it. And so he did like he called the games live, and then he did like a sports podcast each week, like interviewing a former player that might have gone on to college or like the NFL. And so he would like find them and like try to interview them. And so he kind of like brought me along. So I was there for like a couple of them. I wasn't like necessarily doing it with him, but like we kind
Right.
of thought because our last name's Dashiell, so it's like dash two sports. But yeah, so that's kind of like how that started.
I think that's cool. Does your dad still do that?
Yeah, so he actually does still do that. Even though I graduated, like he still goes around, calls the high school games.
I'm guessing he played sports in high school or growing up.
Yes, he played. I know he played football. He might have played baseball. But
You,
yes,
you should know that.
I know he played baseball, and I think he played football, but I don't think he played all through high school, and he didn't play in college.
So let's get into your senior year and you're having to decide where you're going to go to college. What was your thought process about where you wanted to go to college?
So it was really all over the board, which is bad. Like my parents, I honestly wish they would have been like, "This is where you're going." But luckily they were very like, "You can go wherever." And so I ended up going to like a lot of different cheer clinics. I probably visited like over 14 schools in like 9 different states, which is crazy, and it was very overwhelming. And so my dream school was actually University of Colorado, and I just really wanted to go there because originally I really want to do like X Games sports, which would be like calling winter sports or something like that. And so I figured Colorado would be great. I went out there for a cheer clinic. I got accepted and I was so excited, but it was like right before COVID. And so when COVID hit, my parents were like, we can't send you there. Obviously, it's insanely expensive. But my heart was like set on going there. And so this was like literally right before, like, this was probably like, I found out that I got accepted in like December or January, and they told me I couldn't go in like around COVID. So, like, it was a very last minute decision as to where I was going to go to school freshman year because my heart had been set on Colorado. And so I was actually at the beach for spring break, and I met these people that went to University of Missouri, and they asked me what I wanted to major in, and I said sports journalism, and they said Missouri has a great program for that, and I was like, that's crazy. Like I've never even thought about that. So the one school I actually didn't even tour. I ended up like emailing the cheer coach and kind of like getting connected with her, and then applying to the school and getting in. And I like before I even toured it, I was just like, I guess this is where I'm gonna go.
Wow. And so you started at Missouri in the fall of 2020 then.
Yes.
Okay, I feel really old just saying that.
No.
Um um what was it like when you get to Missouri? But several of our athletes have talked about how COVID interrupted their college career
Yes.
and how hard it was. Um either to start in a COVID year or to have COVID end their college career. That was also heartbreaking for one athlete. But for you, what was that change from going from Nashville, and where is the University of Missouri at?
So it's in Columbia, Missouri, which is
Okay.
like it's kind of just like smack in the middle of the
Yeah.
state.
So what was that like going from Nashville or a suburb of Nashville to the University of Missouri?
I honestly kind of was like a culture shock because like I haven't like I literally had never left Franklin, and it kind of is like a bubble that we're in. So like it was a culture shock because it's the Midwest in
Mhm.
my like you wouldn't think it's like that crazy, but the Southern hospitality is like not there. And it's probably even harder during COVID because like we couldn't really interact, but like it's a lot different. I feel like because like when we're you might see a stranger and you're like, hey, like how's it going? If you like do that up there, they're gonna look at you like you're kind of crazy. So it was definitely a little bit different than where I was from.
For those listeners out there that don't really I have a history background, but St. Louis was the gateway to that's that was the gateway to the West. And so Missouri was really the starting point. Once you got across the Mississippi River, Missouri was really the starting point for everybody going westward. So that does make a lot of sense. What did you in what was the difference in your cheer from high school to college?
Yeah. Um, I would say like the biggest thing is the routine is like completely different. Like in high school, I do think my coach kind of prepared us well. Like even in high school, our coach made us run a mile almost every practice, and which sounds crazy, and at the time I really didn't like it. But like in college, you pretty much do the same thing. And I think that like they just prepare you more because like you're being seen by like a lot more people, so it's like you're not just with, high school, like there's only a certain amount of people at the games, and like they're not really there to watch you at, your high school football game. You're kind of just there. But like when you're in like an SEC setting, I think the both the schools that like I've cheered at, I just think that like you sign a contract whenever you go to the school, and each school has like a different contract, but like the contract just talks about like rules and things that like you can and can't do. So there's just a lot more, I feel like, writing on the fact that like you're cheering in college versus high school.
Well, sure. And you're also representing that school on a major stage. And so they really take that brand awareness to the next level.
Right.
Um, NIL started for you when you were a sophomore or a junior.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, it's been at least 2 to 3 years. So you go through Missouri your first year. What was the biggest lesson you learned from that first year at Missouri?
That's a good question. I feel like the biggest lesson I learned is just kind of like be like open minded about things. I feel like not that I really had any like expectations, like I didn't really like know what to expect. But just like being open minded and like being in a totally different setting, like I didn't know anybody. So just like having the mindset of like meeting new people, and just like I don't know, just like having an open mind about like everything. And just like it was kind of hard for me freshman year because it was COVID and like getting a little bit
Mhm.
homesick. Because I had never like lived anywhere else. I kept having to like remind myself. Like everyone here is kind of like in the same boat. Like everyone's doing the same thing. So I think it just taught me honestly like how to be independent and how to like live on my own. I think like freshman year at Missouri like really taught me that.
That is a lot to make your first year away from home and during COVID. That's a lot on you. What precipitated your transfer at the end of that first year?
So basically what happened was it was like the spring, so I think it was around like March. And basically if you were around somebody that had COVID, like you had to get quarantined. Like like in the sports aspect of it, like let's say that like we were all together the night before, or like even at practice, like somebody in your like stunt group, like if they tested positive, you had to be quarantined for like 2 weeks regardless of like if you had it or not. So like this had happened to me, I think like 3 times, and like they put you in like a separate like dorm, or like they put you like you can go stay at like a friend's house, but like you can't be around anybody else, and like you can't stay in your own dorm. or you go home. And like for me, home was like 7 hours away.
Right.
Um, so like I stayed like off campus a little bit, but that was like not a good experience because like I was isolated. So then I ended up going home, and then I went back. Well, they actually, which is crazy, but they had like a series of tests that NCAA athletes had to go through before returning to their sport if you had COVID, which included like you had to get an X-ray of your lungs. You had to get like an EKG, and they were doing tests to see like the effects of COVID, like how they affected the
Mm.
athletes. And so we were like a part of this. Well, my parents already, my mom's self employed. So both my parents' jobs were kind of like struggling, and I was out of state. So it was like a lot of money. And so the last straw was kind of like they were going to have us like pay out of pocket to get this like lung x ray. And there was no way around it. It was either like you have to get it before returning, or like you can't return to cheer. And there were just like already all these expenses that like my parents had, so like my family and I talked about it, and it was like not a really easy decision. But I was kind of already like my mental health, I feel like, was kind of taking a toll because of COVID. So I kind of just like wanted to come back home, and then that was like the final straw. My parents were like, "Look, like we just can't pay for that right now," which is understandable. So I ended up having to like call my coach from home and tell her like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, like I won't be returning." Which that was really hard to do. Because I wanted to come back, but also like at the time it just didn't make sense for like everything that was going on.
No, that's, and that's crazy if they were using the results of the tests for their own research to make you guys pay for it. But um so you decided you stayed home. When did you decide to come to Memphis? Like what precipitated that change?
Yeah. So I actually like I was at home, and I was doing just like online classes at home, through like a local college. And then I originally my plan was to go back to Missouri. But I did kind of have like some hesitations like with going back there just because of like the experience I had had there. And again, I think it would have been different if COVID wasn't a thing, but like it was, and so my representation of Missouri wasn't like great. And so I ended up meeting somebody that went to Memphis, and they kind of like convinced me to go there because I didn't grow up a Tennessee fan. So I'm like very anti like
I
just all.
didn't either.
So like all my friends went to Tennessee, and my parents at the time like really wanted me to go in state, because obviously it's cheaper. And so they're not Tennessee fans, but they kind of wanted me to go to Tennessee. But personally, I just did not want to go there because I know how it is, and like all my friends go there, and I don't like orange. So anyways, I ended up going to Memphis. I did like some research on it too, and like all the sports that are there actually played like a huge role in like why I chose coming to Memphis, because of the Tigers and their previous record, and like the Grizzlies. It just seemed like a really good opportunity, and it was in state. So I went out there and I toured it with my family, and I feel like it was just like it was really cool because I feel like Memphis gets a bad rap, but like after going on the tour with my parents, like they loved it. And yeah, I thought it was really neat.
So yeah, and then you're just literally like 3.5 hours, depending on the speed limit, or you drive up the road. So I'm sure that was, and everything that you went through with COVID and your parents went through, that was going on across the whole country. It wasn't just you guys. So you come to Memphis, and was was the culture shock? I mean, had you ever really been to Memphis before the
Um,
visit?
so yeah, I had been like a couple of times just because like to drive to Missouri, you can actually go through Memphis if you want. And
Right.
so a couple of times I ended up going through Memphis just because like I had been as a kid, but like I hadn't really been since, and I kind of just like wanted to like experience it. So I had been a couple of times, but not really. I feel like the culture shock, it wasn't as bad as I feel like everybody makes it out to be. And honestly, like I was really blessed to go there because like again, where I'm from, I feel like diversity is like zero. So like being in Memphis, like it really expanded my diversity, and it really made me appreciate like just meeting everybody and like seeing everybody's background. So I actually really enjoyed it, but like there are definitely things that like I learned there. Um, because of like just like the environment and everything. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely different.
What's your biggest takeaway positive
Yeah,
from because you were at Memphis for a year?
I was there for like about 2 years.
Okay, two.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway, honestly, like the culture of Memphis is amazing. Like the fact that like I haven't been to another city that like like your culture is like the city. Like when it's like 901, like when you hear 901 or you see it, like you know what it means. And so like the family aspect of Memphis is like literally unlike anywhere else in the world, in my opinion. Like other cities, like even Nashville, like nobody goes around Nashville and like, you know,
615.
yeah, like nobody says that. Nobody's like, "Oh, like Nashville." Like nobody says that. But like in Memphis, like it is Memphis. Like it's a family. Like regardless of like who you are or where you're at. Like if I'm somewhere and I'm wearing a Memphis shirt or like 901, like if somebody knows what that means, like they're going to say something. And so like my biggest takeaway was just like the family aspect and like everybody supports everybody in Memphis and I just think it's a really cool like culture
It is.
atmosphere.
It is. And, for me, I didn't grow up in Memphis. I grew up just north of Jackson, not far
Okay.
from Franklin, Tennessee, McKenzie.
Yeah.
Um, so, mine was the same thing. And living in Houston, I moved there. Um, I lived in Memphis for 18 years, and then I moved to Houston, lived there for 16. But that was one of the aspects I missed so much was the family atmosphere. Like, you belonged to something. In Houston, I had the hardest time because I didn't felt like I could connect with the city at all. Because Houston is third or fourth largest city in the United States. So for me, I really missed that. And that was part of the reason I wanted to move back because I wanted that community atmosphere, that feeling of just belonging and everybody just kind of goes together
Yeah.
um, and supports the city. Or so now you decided to continue cheer. So you did cheer at Memphis, right? The first.
No, so I tried out for well, the first year I went to Memphis, actually, I decided to go to Memphis like prior to tryouts. So I
Right.
missed tryouts. So the first year I went there, I was actually unable to try out, which was unfortunate. So that was just because the first year I went there, I just was unable to cheer because it was too late. The second year I actually tried out and I didn't make it. Which I think that also kind of adds to my story a little bit. But I
Does.
did try out and I didn't make it.
Michael
So
Jordan never won a national championship as a as a college player either, did he? I don't think
uh,
he did. I'm not up on my sports history.
it's okay.
Um
But yeah,
so and we've had a lot of people on here that they've talked about how, they didn't win something or didn't get something or missed out on something. And I think sometimes it's the fans that hold the grudges and the hardships and the sorrow
yeah,
more than the players or the athletes do. So what did and we'll go on. So your second year you didn't make it, but you were still in sports journalism and you were doing a lot of sports reporting around because that's how I met you. I
yeah,
guess your second year.
yes. Yeah, so it started when I started writing articles for the Daily Helmsman, which is like the Memphis newspaper. I started writing sports articles, and so that's how I originally like got into like going to games and like being sideline. I was like, you know what, any and I can take, I'll take it. And so I started just writing some sports articles. And then from there, actually, I was about to apply for like an internship that I had seen, but somehow they found me first. I don't even know how, but Bluff City Media like found me on Twitter and like DM'd me and then they were like hiring different positions. And so they called me and asked me what I wanted to do and I was like, "Well, I saw an internship position open for like sports writing and like that's what I do." They're like, "No, but like what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I really want to be a reporter." And so they actually ended up just being like, "Okay, well like if you want to report for us, we'll hire you." And it was like one of the greatest things that had ever happened to me.
So, it's funny because you and I actually had a conversation. I believe it was at a Memphis baseball game
Huh.
about the lack of women in sports. The
Yeah,
lack of that conversation, not only women in sports, but reporting on women in sports.
right.
You and I actually had that, and strangely enough, this kind of came about
Yeah.
or made me more open to doing this as a result of that. I just felt like I got a little chip on my shoulder too.
Yeah.
So, what did that year doing that? So, did you start? Was that your second year at Memphis that you
Yes.
started reporting? So, culmination of everything at Memphis. What would you say your biggest takeaway was from your years at Memphis?
Yeah. I'm one of those people too. I believe like everything happens for a reason. So like I think just like being in Memphis, like if I wasn't in Memphis, that opportunity wouldn't have presented itself. And so it honestly brought me like a lot of connections and it brought me a lot of I feel like experience that like I wouldn't have gotten if I wasn't in Memphis because, it can be hard to like become a sideline reporter and to do anything like that. And so when I first started, like I was nervous, but I feel like it was a great like introduction into like doing what I want to do because I got to like have the experience of it with a great, Memphis Tiger
Yeah.
basketball. Like it doesn't get any better than that. And so just like being in that setting and environment and getting the chance to like see how a press conference is run or like
Mhm.
see how I would be doing things potentially in the future, like if I were reporting or like being on the sideline, I just feel like it brought me like a lot of really good experience that I wouldn't get anywhere else.
What was your biggest interview?
Um, Man, well, so I think it like the very first interview I ever did, what it was for the paper, but like my friend actually filmed it and it was Alex Lomax and it was like right after it was like they were at the Orlando ESPN Invitational.
Hmm.
So, like before their season had even really like started. But like I just remember like getting to be there and my friend was like, "Look, like there's Alo, like if you want to go talk to him." And I was like, "What?" And so like he like and I was so nervous. I was like, I've never done this. Like, and so like, it was like the very first interview I did, but I just like vividly remember it so well. So that was like a really big one. Just because it was like the first one, and then I actually interned for now it's the UFL, but it was the USFL. So I got to do a couple interviews there. And that was pretty cool because a couple of like the UFL players, it was kind of neat to like interview them. But yeah, I just vividly remember like interviewing Ayla for the first time.
So then what led you to Ole Miss?
Yeah.
Because
So
I was very sad. I was
I
very sad.
It was a very last minute decision. I loved Memphis so much, and I was actually really sad too. But I tried out for cheer at Memphis, right?
Hmm.
But because I was like, I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna try out again. So I tried out again. But I really wanted to cheer again, and I was like, you know what? Like, no matter what it takes, like I want to cheer in college again. So I had a couple of friends who had come to like a Memphis cheer clinic and they had cheered at Northwest Community College, and they were going to cheer at Ole Miss. And they're like, "You should come to an Ole Miss cheer clinic. Like, you should just see how it is." Because see, I wanted a backup in case I didn't make Memphis again.
Sure.
That was like my main plan. I was like, you know what? Like, if I don't make Memphis, like, I really want to cheer. I don't know that I could make it at Ole Miss either, but like, it's worth a shot. So they told me to come. I went to a clinic, and after that clinic, like, the Ole Miss coach was just like really recruiting me hard. And I didn't think that I could make it after not making Memphis, but I was like praying about it, and I was like, you know what? Like, maybe this will work out. And so I just felt really like wanted and like appreciated when I was at Ole Miss. So I went to their tryout, but their tryout was like, um, I think it was like the weekend, like right after like Memphis tryouts. Um,
Hmm.
so I like wasn't sure if I was gonna make the Memphis team. So I wanted to back up. So I ended up making the Memphis team, but I found that out like the day of like Ole Miss tryouts. And so the Ole Miss coach was like, "You're gonna have to pick," and she was like, "If you make the Ole Miss team, like, will you come to Ole Miss?" And it was so hard. Like I literally had like a few hours to like figure out what I was gonna do. Um, and I ended up going to Ole Miss just because I hadn't made it at Memphis, and like the environment at Ole Miss, I just felt like cheer wise, they just like really wanted me, and the coach was just like really like recruiting me, and so that's kind of like overall how I made that. Although like I hated to leave Memphis. Like I really did. It was really hard. Like that was a really tough decision. But I think it was just I wanted something a little bit like different and I wanted to try it out. I was like, I feel like this is an opportunity. that it would be kind of hard to like turn down, and like maybe it's a chance for like, you know, something new. And their journalism, I did tour like the school and everything, and so it was pretty cool as well. So I was like, you know, it's a new experience. I'll try it out. But that's kind of like what led to my decision.
That is a tough decision. It's interesting. Justin Verlander, who plays for the Houston Astros, when he got traded from Detroit, he literally had 40 minutes to make that decision to
Wow.
go to be traded from Detroit to Houston. And this was like 2 months before they got into the October playoffs.
Wow.
And it was also like right after Houston flooded. So he literally had 40 minutes to decide.
That's crazy.
Okay. And he decided to go for it. And the rest is history,
Wow.
And so,
Yeah.
we can only do what's put in front of us, and we
Right.
can only go with the information we have
Right.
in front of us. And there's nothing wrong with taking a new opportunity to see where it might go and how, because everything that you've gone through makes you who you are, all the
Right.
experiences, and you're not going to replace one with the other. It's all a part of who you are. So, um, now we get back to where you are currently.
Hmm.
So while you're at Ole Miss, what, well, we've already talked about that. You said you ended up choosing sports journalism because of the cheer schedule. But what's in it for you going into this last year and a half of college?
Yeah. So there is like a program there. It's called Newswatch Ole Miss, and it's like kind of like what I did in high school. So it's like our own like news station, news channel. So I am like a sports reporter for that, which is kind of neat. So I kind of can do like the whole sideline reporting things, just like for our school. But I was kind of unable to do that because of cheer.
Right.
Um, like I did it for track, I did it for golf, I did it for some sports that like weren't going on while I was cheering, but it was definitely hard to get like the full experience. So just doing more of that and getting more involved. I'm hoping to get like an internship this fall, kind of like with like an outside sports network or like with Ole Miss, just so I can like have more experience on game days. But I think just like focusing more on like my classes and like just being able, because I was taking 18 hours last semester, which was a lot, and so I also have to take that like this semester just to try to like catch up, because of transferring. It kind of does like not all
Yes.
your transfer, but that is like a lot of load, especially while cheering. So just like focusing more on like classes and hopefully doing some more like side internships and stuff. That's kind of like what my focus is.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Um, so actually on my bucket list, I really want to cheer for the Titans. That has like been a dream of mine since I was like little, and I know that sounds crazy. But I really hope to once I graduate, I want to move back to Nashville for at least a year and possibly try out for the Titans and like see where that goes. But I really want to do sports reporting, hopefully for like a team. I had an internship. This sounds really bad, but I had an internship this summer with News Channel 2, and it made me realize how I don't want to work in news. Like I don't really want
No,
for like
that's good. That is good.
yeah. So I don't really want to work for like a news station just because even though you're sports, they could assign you with a crime story and you have to go cover it, and that's just something I really don't want to do. So if I could cover like college sports or like one specific college sports team, I would love to do that.
You know, I think that it's just as important to know what you don't want to do as to know what you want to do. And if you talk about like look, people go through med school, go through nursing, they have to do rotations to figure out what they want to specialize in. So there's no, I mean, that's good. You figure it out now and not later on in life. And now you can pursue, now you know exactly what you want to pursue and that, that's what you want to do.
Right.
And you can look for those opportunities out there. So, as we finish this up, what do you see as your value today?
Yeah. Um, I kind of see myself as like with all the experiences that like I've had. I feel like I've like met every person that I've met along my journey for like a reason. And I just feel like I don't know how to explain it, but I really like being a light in like other people's lives. So like I feel like my value is like if somebody's had a hard day or like not knowing somebody's situation, I would say. But trying to bring like a light into their life or like into a situation that like might not be good because like when you meet someone like you never know what they're going through. And so like even in Memphis, like I met a lot of people and like, you know, you would have no idea like what they were going through. And like the more I got to know them, I just like couldn't believe their backstory and like how like what they had come from to like seeing to where they're at now. And so I feel like just like not really knowing everybody's story, but like still trying to like bring positivity into people's lives is something that I really try to do and like I really feel like I like value that about myself.
No, I love that. And and I think maybe that's why we connected because like the very first time I said hello to you, you were like gave me this big smile back. And I just I felt like I kind of knew you without really knowing you,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, "Hey, Mason."
Yeah.
Whenever I saw you out and about. But it's true, I think that's one of the things that I love about uh doing this podcast, and I've had another one before, is just like learning people's stories. How people got from A to B to me is fascinating. And it's just like they come up with all of these, forks in the road, and why did they decide to go that way as opposed to the other way, and how does that make them who they are today has been really interesting. So last question, if you could go back and give 9-year-old Mason advice, what would it be?
Man. I think the big thing for me is like know how to like overcome adversity. Because like again, like I didn't think it would be easy, but like I never saw myself transferring schools like at all. I never saw myself even cheering like in college. But like I think I would just like tell myself to like never give up and also to just like prepare yourself for like things that you might not expect and like know how to like overcome adversity and like not be afraid of like what life necessarily like throws at you but just like find a way to like move around it because you know the path that like we think that like we're gonna take it might be like straight and we're like oh this is what's gonna happen and then like I feel like it never happens like that because like you know I had to take like two or three different routes to get to where I was going or like even like once I stopped cheering for like a year and a half and didn't make it at Memphis, I was like, well, like what if I don't cheer again? But I feel like I just knew in my heart like I really wanted to do it. So kind of just like going back and like telling my 9-year-old self like don't give up, like whatever you do, like if people, you know, tell you like you can't do it or like when life knocks you down, just keep going.
I think that is great advice, and you're so right. I mean, there's so many opportunities out there, and just if you want something, and you don't get it the first time, figure out how you can get it a different way, and um I do have one last question. So,
Yeah.
who would be your dream interview?
Oh man.
Just
That's
came to my mind.
somebody that's like still alive.
Yes.
So my probably her name's Alana Rizzo, and she's a sports reporter, or she was a sports reporter for the Dodgers. And she's like a big reason that I actually wanted to become a sports reporter. She was like probably the first female sports reporter I ever saw. And she's just like a huge inspiration to me because she just like did everything with the Dodgers for like 10 or 15 years. I think she's retired now from the Dodgers, but like she was like their face. Like she was at every game and like I followed her, kept up with her, and I just like she's just really inspirational to me. So I feel like if I could interview anyone, like she would be somebody that I would love to talk to about her career.
I think that's great. I'll have to go look her up and see about her. Where can people find you? Where would you like them to follow you at on
Um,
social media?
yeah, well, you can follow my Instagram, which the name behind that's actually funny too. I haven't changed it because my friends tell me not to. But my Instagram is oceanwaves_108. I've had that name since like fifth grade, but you guys can follow me on there.
So, and I'll link that in the show notes. So tell me, okay, really quickly, tell me the story behind
Yeah.
the name.
Well, there used to be this like National Geographic game called like Animal Jams, way back when, like literally when I was in like elementary school, middle school, and it would like generate a name for you. So it gave me the name like Ocean Waves, And whenever I made my Instagram, like in middle school, that's what I made my Instagram name. And then I kept it through high school because all my friends would call me Ocean Waves. And they're like, don't change it, don't change it. So, like, it's kind of just like a joke now. And, like, even in college, like, on my cheer team, like, everyone just called me Ocean Waves and I would respond. So that's why, like, I still haven't changed it, which I probably should eventually, but it's kind of just
No.
a joke.
Well, and the thing is, okay, the fact that you just said in elementary school when you got on Instagram made me feel really old again.
No.
But no, I think that's really cool though. And you know, it is interesting because I connect with a lot of people on Instagram
Yeah.
and I know their handles on Instagram, which are not necessarily their names. So then I'm like, what is your name? Like, what's your actual name?
Right.
And I had reached out to somebody a few years ago. She was an engineering graduate, and she started at NASA when I lived in Houston.
Oh,
And
wow.
I got her to be on my podcast at that time. And her handle was, um, I forgot what it was, but I'm like, "What's your real name?"
Yeah.
And she had to tell me, and it was she had always wanted to be a pilot too, so that was part of it. So she's actually going to test pilot school out in California now, living her
That's
dreams. So.
awesome.
Um, I am so excited for you. I can't wait to see what the future has in store for you. As I said, we hit it off immediately, and I just love seeing you. I love talking to you, and I'm very excited about what your future has to hold for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as we get finished with this episode, I got to get back on track now. That wraps up today's show. Mason, thank you so much for being on the show today, especially it was last minute. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. It was great talking to you.
So, thank you all for listening, especially if you've made it all the way to this part of the show. I so appreciate all your support. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen or watch. My mantra is like, share, and review. You can follow us on social media at 5THQRT Podcast. Until next time, remember, change is our ally and it paves the way for greatness. Stay inspired. Have a great rest of the week.